Before the haunting of Ballechin House was shared in the media and hit public attention, activity was reported for 2 whole decades. It seemed the family wanted to keep the cat in the bag, but as you're about to find out, it was more about keeping the dog in the ground. The chilling supernatural activity at the mansion, which terrorised those living there, began to spread like wildfire, which attracted the attention of an early paranormal researcher who revolutionised the way investigations were carried out and documented some truly fascinating claims. I'm Bleaki, and today I will tell you about the case of Ballechin House, a strange haunting of an old mansion in Perthshire, Scotland, which was believed to have been started by one of the house's owners after his plan to resurrect himself by taking over the body of his dog. Didn't go to plan, leaving him disembodied, trapped, confused, and incredibly angry. Ballechin House was built in 1806 on land that had been owned by the Stuart family since the 16th century, who were descendants of King Robert II of Scotland. The newer building replaced an older manor house, which was torn down in 1834, which was inherited by Major Robert Stuart after the death of his father. Robert, who served in the army of the East India Company, lived in India, obviously. That would be one hell of a commute. Yeah, sorry Colonel, I'm going to be a bit late for duty. The boat's running a few days behind. Robert's absence led him to renting the house out until he retired from service after 25 years and returned to the Scottish estate. He moved into a cottage on the land and lived there for several years until the current tenants moved out of the main house. The Major, as he was known, had a limp, a result of an injury during his service, and was said to be pretty eccentric. In his retirement, he kept many dogs and loved every one of them, but his obsession for hounds and his belief in resurrection became extremely unhealthy. While in India, Robert took a keen interest in spirituality and studied reincarnation and transmigration, which is the ability to transfer a human soul into another non-human body upon death. As he grew older and his body got weaker, he set his sights on occupying the body of his favourite black spaniel. Interesting choice. The Major never got married, and for 26 years he lived alone in the huge mansion, except for the company of his young housekeeper, Sarah, who died suddenly in 1873 at the age of 27, under mysterious circumstances. While he had no wife or children, he did have 2 brothers and 6 sisters, one of whom, Isabella, became a nun. Isabella took the name of Frances Helen and spent the remainder of her life in a nunnery until she died in 1880. In the will written by the Major in 1853, he left Ballechin to his niece and nephews, the children of his sister Mary. Sadly, the eldest of these children died without any heirs, and the 3 youngest children were later removed from the will for some unknown reason. This meant that when the Major died, the house went to Mary's second son, John, who had plenty of children and a wife to fill the large house. Whether it was a fallout about the changes to the will, or just not willing to entertain the Major's paranormal or spiritual notions, the family made the decision to shoot all of his dogs shortly after the Major took his last breath. Another reason why the family may have killed the dogs could have something to do with one small detail in the Major's plan. In order to transfer his spirit to the dog, they would have had to feed his corpse to the hound. Yup, Robert was willing to become a sausage for a spaniel. Later, it was believed that killing the dogs resulted in Robert being forced to exist as a lost spirit, unable to move on after tethering his soul with the body of the spaniel. This led to Robert's spirit growing bitter and hateful towards his family and the house he once loved. One request the Major did get permitted, however, was being buried next to Sarah, the former housekeeper. Now, even before Sarah's death, there was speculation that the young housekeeper was polishing more than just bed knobs at Ballechin, if you get my drift, which was only fueled further after his request was to be buried next to her. If he did intend on being a dog, however, I wonder why it mattered where his body was buried. Soon after, strange things began to torment the new residents of the house, including loud knocking on the walls and the sound of loud voices arguing somewhere in the house, which would go quiet when people rushed to the area. Robert was identified as the spirit after his nephew and his wife heard footsteps walking around their bed which sounded like it had a limp. It was either another spirit had accidentally stepped on a piece of Lego, or more plausibly, it was the Major. It is believed that Sarah died in the main bedroom where these phantom footsteps were heard, which explains the activity in that room. John's wife was once in the Major's old study, reading, when a strange smell began to fill the room. She tried to ignore it as she flipped through the pages until it became too powerful. She recognised the smell straight away from her childhood. It was the smell of wet dog. As she went to leave to see if somebody had allowed a dog to enter the house, she felt something push past her leg violently that felt like an invisible dog. The paranormal experiences became so frequent that the servants and the governess refused to stay in the house out of fear that the spirit would do something terrible. A fear that turned out to be merited. Although John Stewart managed to live in the estate for 21 years and put up with the loud banging and disembodied voices screaming from somewhere in the dark recesses of the mansion, his family had enough and was forced to build a new wing in 1883 for his children to live in, where they believed the Major wouldn't bother them. He also allowed the Major's cottage to be used by nuns as a retreat, as he believed it would make his uncle happy, with his sister Isabella taking the oath many years before. He hoped it would put the restless spirit at peace, but it didn't. In fact, it put John in the firing line. One morning in 1895, John had a phone call with his agent before setting out for London on family business. During the call, however, 3 violent knocks were heard from somewhere in the room. Later that day, while in London, John was trying to navigate the busy streets and stepped out into the road to cross it. John never made it to the other side, however, after a cab ploughed into him, killing him instantly. After the agent told people about the 3 loud bangs he heard while on the call, believers in the paranormal took the sinister knocks as a warning from the other side. After John's death, the haunted reputation of Ballechin House began to spread around the area, especially by former guests and staff who had spent time in the house. In 1892, Father Hayden, a priest, spent the night at the house. After hearing dog-like sounds, bangs and phantom shrieks, he moved to another room, but the sounds followed. The following year, Father Hayden met a woman who had been a governess at the house for 12 years. She told the priest that she had left after hearing chilling noises in the same 2 rooms Father Hayden had stayed in, as well as others. In 1896, a family rented the house with a lease for 1 year, but left after just 11 weeks due to the sheer level of paranormal activity. Family members claimed that the poltergeist was making their life a living hell. They heard violent bangs, thumps, rattles, rustling, blood-curdling groans, and felt icy chills that engulfed rooms before vanishing, and heard the limping phantom footsteps that had been heard previously. One night, the youngest daughter of the family was awoken by the feeling of her bed sheets being tugged. Sleepy-eyed, the girl sat up to see nobody in the moonlit room. Suddenly, the bed sheets were yanked violently, almost pulling the terrified girl with them. On several occasions, family members saw 2 apparitions roaming the house, which included a strange mist and the faint shape of a man. Once the story of the haunting circulated, a lady called Ada Goodrich Freer came up with the idea of investigating the house and documenting the paranormal activity there. The problem was, Ada couldn't afford the hefty price of renting the huge mansion, so she turned to Lord Bute, who was an avid ghost hunter back then, who agreed to sponsor the investigation. Lord Bute agreed to rent the house for her, as well as for another paranormal investigator called Colonel Taylor. Ada came up with the idea of putting the house on a round-the-clock investigation, preempting Harry Price's investigation at the Borley Rectory, which you can learn more about in this video here. Things got a bit deceptive, however, when the pair realised that the current owners wouldn't be very happy about a paranormal investigation in their home, especially after struggling to rent the mansion out due to its haunted reputation. This led to Ada telling the owner that she and her friends intended to use the residence for a fishing holiday. I can imagine her overdoing it to sell the lie, like turning up in a novelty fishing t-shirt with a fishing rod over her shoulder. Even from their first morning in the house, they heard clanging sounds that repeated in 2-hour intervals, the sound of disembodied voices from somewhere in the house, footsteps, dragging, pattering sounds in empty rooms, and other loud bangs and knockings. On one of the first nights, she even experienced her bed sheets being pulled off when she was fast asleep, just like the daughter of the previous family who rented the mansion. The investigators decided to invite 35 guests to stay at the house, all of whom had no idea the house was haunted. Apparently, I don't know, as you guys are about to find out, they all partook in the investigation, so they must have had an idea. Also, who just accepts a random invite to stay at a house with 30 odd other random people? Can you imagine the line for the bathroom in the morning? The guests reported numerous supernatural activities, including strange knockings and footsteps. On one occasion, several of the members heard someone reading out aloud, but when they investigated the room, the voice fell silent and no one was in sight. A phantom hunchback was once seen walking up the main staircase and vanished halfway up, while one of the other guests reported seeing the ghost of a black spaniel rush past them. If they really had no idea of the haunted reputation and the story of the Major, this is a really interesting detail. Others claim to have seen a phantom dogtail and also heard what sounded like a tail striking doors and knocking over objects on low tables and the floor. Ada had brought her own dog on the stay, and one night she was awoken by the sound of her pup whimpering in fear. Following its gaze, she saw 2 disembodied dog paws on the table beside the bed, as if the spirit was pulling itself up. A male member of the group also reported seeing a detached hand floating in the air at the foot of his bed, holding a crucifix at him. Adding to this trend of partial apparitions, a maid hired to work at the house during the investigation saw the upper half of a female spirit wearing a grey shawl, seemingly floating through the air. The investigators conducted sessions with a Ouija board and got some compelling evidence, and also received automatic writing messages. One message told the group that they should go to a nearby glen at dusk. Doing what the ghost suggested, Ada was left chilled by the sight of the nun moving slowly up the glen, which vanished beneath a tree. Ada claimed to have seen this entity several more times during her stay, which would either be weeping uncontrollably or talking to a person that wasn't there. Other guests reported seeing the figure as a young lady with a pale face, long hair and wearing a hood, which would dissipate into thin air when people tried to approach her. Ada believed this was the spirit of Isabella, the Major's sister, whose spirit was replaying her unknown sorrow at the glen. Excited by this, Ada wrote a letter on the 25th of February 1896 to the project's investor, Lord Bute. Like Ada and the others, Bute believed that it must have been Miss Isabella, who had died in 1880. So this was a pretty cut and dry haunting, right? A ghost nun, a phantom spaniel, and a limping ghost who wanted his dog to eat his corpse. Typical ghosty stuff. But unfortunately, the investigation wasn't as straightforward as documented in Ada's book, The Alleged Haunting of B House. So before the other guests reported the hunchback, the floating hand and the other entities, they initially only said that they heard loud thumps and the phantom footsteps. But as the rumours about the house began to spread like butter on toast, the guests began to enjoy themselves and the attention they were getting, which could have led to them elaborating their claims to gothic proportions and playing up to those interested in the case. You have to remember, around this time, interest in the occult was at its peak, so a story like this would have gotten a lot of attention. The entire experiment was reported in the Times newspaper and was later documented in Ada's book, which was published in 1899. Ada was riding high on the success of the investigation, but her lies are about to catch up with her. The owner of the house, JMS Stewart, was far from happy after learning about the group's ulterior motive. In fact, he went on to write to the newspapers from Paris in June of 1897, saying that he would not have rented the house to a group of ghost hunters if he knew their intentions. The Stuart family went very public about their upset, which pressured the publishers to change all the names in the book. Due to the lack of credible names and the locations, and the title of the book being changed to The Alleged Haunting of B House, it never gained widespread acknowledgement as a real haunted house, and the story fell through the cracks of time. What further tarnished the reputation of the investigation was that one of Ada's guests, Mr. Calendar Ross, also struck a blow towards the credibility of the haunting by stating that he was suspicious of working with a member of the SPR, as they tended to hype their paranormal investigations. He ended his statement by saying the haunting was nothing more than the product of a practical joke and diseased imaginations. Ouch. Someone did enjoy their stay at Ballechin House. Should have prepared a nice hamper for everyone, Ada. Who can stay angry with a bag of cookies and a dairy Lunchable? Whatever the truth is surrounding the haunting, what is known for sure is that Ballechin House became yet another victim of neglect. The house was left unloved and began to fall into disrepair. The owner put it up for auction in 1913, but no one wanted to buy it, whether for its price, its condition, or its ghostly reputation. By 1932, the house is far too gone, and in 1963, Ballechin House was demolished. So what happened to Ada? Well, after the controversies surrounding the Ballechin House investigation, the SPR let her go, which resulted in Ada turning her attention to folklore and fantasy, which may have been an indication that her belief in the paranormal may have been waning. Ada was always a colourful character before and after the investigation. It was rumoured that she had an affair with Constance Moore, the daughter of Canon Daniel Moore. She eventually married a man 16 years younger than herself and went on to live abroad. While the Major was never able to turn himself into a dog, Ada certainly became a cougar. Now, although Ada was a member of the Society for Psychical Research, predating controversial paranormal researcher Harry Price, she didn't have the greatest reputation when it came to her paranormal investigations. This was basically because she didn't mind telling a few porcupines to make her work seem more impactful. For example, she once told the owners of Clarendon House in Surrey that their house wasn't haunted, but included in a report to the SPR that she saw a hooded female figure floating through the grounds. On another occasion, she was caught tapping a table during a seance session to fake responses. She also relied on stories told to her by staff members working at the locations instead of doing her own thorough investigations at the place. Wait a minute, that kind of sounds like my whole YouTube channel. Ada also bragged that her family were Highland gentry, when in fact she was born in Uppington, a working class market town in the UK. But yeah, Ada liked to sensationalise stories to make things more spicy, like every news outlet on the planet now. Ada died in 1930, and despite the infamy of Ballechin House, we can't just write it all off as fake. There was a lot of paranormal activity reported at the house long before the investigation. Also, it was a groundbreaking idea to have a haunted house put on around-the-clock surveillance, which inspired hundreds of credible investigations in the century that followed. I think when a lot of people get involved in something and that thing begins to trend in the media and people question the authenticity of the claims, things can get messy, words can get twisted, and those involved may make up lies to put the spotlight on themselves for a little while. There are just too many factors to say, yes, it's haunted, or no, it isn't. Despite what people may think of Ada and her investigation, the case of Ballechin House is a truly fascinating one and definitely has unique details compared to other hauntings which could have been lost to time if not documented in the newspapers and the book. It's just a shame that the case was tarnished by the deceptive nature of not telling the owner their motives for renting the house. Then again, the owner clearly did say that he wouldn't have rented the house to ghost hunters, so the investigation wouldn't have happened at all if they didn't lie. If you'd like to learn more about lesser known hauntings, why not hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You can also check out my library of videos by clicking on my channel name below this video. And until next time, sleep well, friends.